Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar for launch of the Refugees Country Briefing for Palestine. It's great to see that so many of you could join us here today. This is the third webinar in this series presenting newly developed Refugees Country Briefings. We of course hope that today's webinar will be both interesting and relevant for the work that you're doing at your institutions and in your countries on a daily basis. My name is Erland and I'll be the host of this webinar today. I work for NOKUT, the Norwegian Economic Center responsible for organizing this webinar series. This webinar is presented within the framework of the ARENA Toki 3 project, a third cycle Erasmus plus NARIC project. ARENA is a cooperation between NARICs, international organizations, and higher education institutions from across Europe, all working together towards the common goal of enabling access to further studies for refugees, displaced persons, and persons in a refugee-like situation. The project is coordinated by NOKUT. So, we're here today to present the first results of the project, which are 5 refugees country briefings that have been developed for Yemen, Sudan, Palestine, Burundi, and Rwanda. The briefings address the need for updated and relevant information resources and have been developed specially to assist with the assessment of qualifications held by refugees and those in a refugee-like situation. The briefings have been authored by expert credential evaluators from the NARICs of Norway, Italy, and Belgium Flanders, all with extensive experience from the field of recognition. We'll today hear from the authors of the briefing for Palestine. The Palestine briefing has been authored by Letizia Pisoni and Salome Matos from CIMEA, the Italian NARIC Center. And both Letizia and Salome have extensive experience from recognition and as credential evaluators. So we look forward to hearing from them shortly on the briefing for Palestine. But first, just a few words on the organization of this webinar to make everything run as smoothly as possible today. Shortly after Salome and Letizia are done with their presentation, we'll open up a Q&A session to hear your questions and your comments related to this topic in general, but of course, in particular, the briefing developed for Palestine. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts later on when we get to the Q&A session. However, we kindly ask you to wait until the presentation has completed, until you send us your questions using the Q&A tab visible below us here. If you have any technical problems occurring along the way, fingers crossed that everything works well with the video and sound quality. But if not, please let us know using the chat tab and we'll do our best to look into it as soon as possible. But now let's hear more about Palestine and the briefing that has been developed. So Letizia and Salome, I'll leave the floor to you to take us through the briefing.
Hello, everyone. My name is Salome. As Erlin said, I'm a credential evaluator of CIMEA. And I will give you some important information regarding the political situation and its impact on education. And then my colleague Letizia will talk specifically about the education system of Palestine. So geographically speaking, the West Bank is bordered by Israel and Jordan, and the Gaza Strip by Israel, Egypt, and the Mediterranean Sea. The official language in these territories is Arabic, but also Hebrew is spoken in West Bank and Gaza Strip. So in terms of history, the historical background, after World War I, Palestine fell under the British mandate. And in 1948, concurrent with the creation of the State of Israel, Palestinians stay in 2 main areas, West Bank and Gaza Strip. And the rest of the Palestinians became refugees in other countries. In 1967, as a result of the end of 6 days war, Israel took control of both territories. From that time until the beginning of 90s, there was a continuing tensions and armed conflict. The beginning of 1990s were quite important because it started a peace process known as Oslo Peace Accords. That obtained, and at its major result, the establishment of the Palestinian Authority that assumed partial control of the administration and the service in main areas of Palestinian life, such as, for example, education. However, Oslo Accords' main goal failed in their ultimate goal of bringing Israel and Palestinians to agree on a full-fledged peace plan. Nowadays, Palestinians are fighting for an official state that is formally recognized by all countries. The borders are not clearly defined, and hostilities and political tension persists. So obviously, this troubled situation has been having a huge impact on Palestinian education. In practical terms, we can see that from 1948 until 1967, education in Palestinian territories was administered by Jordan in the West Bank side and by Egypt in Gaza Strip. After 1967 until 1990, the situation remained more or less the same, but some changes were introduced by Israeli administration. It's important to underline that in this time frame, universities in these territories were part of the collective effort to preserve the Palestinian identity, as well as to provide young Palestinians with the opportunity to pursue higher education studies. In 1990s, as a result of the Oslo Accords, the responsibility for education was transferred to the Palestinian National Authority, and the sector has suffered significant changes. I will give you two main important facts. The Ministry of Education was established, and the enrollment of all schools and also in higher education were substantially increased. The recent history of these territories until nowadays is signed by violence and constant uncertainty. Many teachers were forced to retire, teachers' unions were prohibited, and students were expelled or arrested. Palestinian schools were closed for extended periods, and also some universities were shut down for more than 4 years. So this is more or less the current situation in Palestine and its impact on education. So now I'll give the floor to Letizia that will explain to all of us the education in Palestine.
Thank you very much, Salome, for this, let's say, overview of the context in Palestine that really helped us to understand better than the education system. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Letizia Brambilla Pisoni, and as Salome already told you, I am a credential evaluator in CIMEA. So let's go to the education in Palestine. Starting from the responsible governing bodies of education, we can identify two main bodies: the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. There is the ministry in charge of primary and secondary education, and then the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, that is in charge of everything concerned post-secondary education and the and higher education especially. I provided you the two links, the direct link to their website. Please bear in mind that main information are available in Arabic. There is also the possibility to switch in English, but it depends on the day, and not always the website works properly. In addition to that, on the territories, there are also the, let's say, the presence of two other main bodies that are the UNRWA and other NGOs that provide support in the education sector in all Palestinian territories, especially by providing education free of charge for refugees. When it comes to the recognized higher education institutions, the full and complete list of accredited higher education institutions is available at on the website of the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research. We can identify 4 different types of higher education institutions, named universities, that have at least 3 or 4 colleges or faculties, and that they offer courses from undergraduate till postgraduate level. University colleges that mainly offer courses at undergraduate level, so bachelor basically, and diploma. Polytechnic that also, as the word says, are more focused on providing professional and vocational oriented degrees, especially diploma, and intermediate colleges. When it comes to national education reforms, as Salome already explained to you, actually it's quite recent, the first implemented reform. I would like to point the attention on the law on higher education of 1998 that established that every citizen has the right to higher education and provides a legal framework for the organization and the management of higher education institutions. Nevertheless, there are still a lot of work. There is still a lot of work to do, actually. And Palestine, the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research recently published an education sector strategic plan in order to guarantee access to every citizen's, at least at compulsory education. So still is a work in progress process. Here you can find the education chart of education in Palestine. Basically, as you can see, it resembles more or less the Arabic system of education, bearing in mind that education was previously under control of Jordan and Egypt. We have 12 years of school, and actually at the level of upper secondary education, as you can see from the graphic, there are a general secondary stream divided into 2 streams, scientific and human sciences, and the vocational secondary stream that it's much more oriented to labor market. And also at the level of, let's say, post-secondary education, this difference is still taking into account. So we have bachelor degree, master and PhD, so a common study path that is much more oriented to the academic one, and then other courses and other degrees that are offered at intermediate colleges and are again addressed directly to the labor market. So at the end of secondary school, student obtained a general certificate of secondary education, شهادة دراسة ثانوية عامة, that is commonly known as توجيهي. What does it mean? It means that when finishing secondary school, students take these national exams, and according to the final average that they obtained, the requirements set every academic year by the Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research, and according to also the stream that they choose at the level of upper secondary education, then they can, let's say, decide in which field of studies they can further their studies. And this happens especially for the general certificate of secondary education. When it comes to the vocational stream, that is divided into industrial, agriculture, and so on, there are many fields of studies. Actually, there is a technical توجيهي exam, and mainly students further their studies into intermediate colleges in order to prepare themselves with a much more knowledge and practice on a specific field useful for the labor market. Here you also have some few information, let's say, about higher education at academic level. So we have, again, a first cycle degree named bachelor that is usually 4 years in length, according, of course, to the field of studies, offered basically at every university. The language of instruction, both at secondary education and also at this level of bachelor, is usually Arabic, except for medical education and engineering education. After the bachelor, that sometimes also include a final thesis, student can further their studies at secondary in a second cycle degree. Master is more academic oriented, and in order to get access to a master program, a bachelor degree, usually with an average of not less than C, is required. Otherwise, there is another kind of diploma issued again from university, that is the diploma Ali, a higher diploma in a specific field that commonly lasts just 1 year. And that sometimes students, after obtaining the higher diploma, can further their studies into the other year at master level. And then we have a third cycle degree, that is the PhD, that lasts minimum 3 years, with a final dissertation of at least 25 credits, offered in some fields, actually in Palestine. Coming to other specific diploma, we have a teacher education. Actually, this is very important because teacher education in Palestine is a sector that suffers a lot, actually. And also because of infrastructure, for different reasons, actually, but there is a need of teachers. So universities and colleges offer a teaching diploma aimed at training teachers after or during, it depends, a study path of bachelor education that grants academic right for a professional qualification. And this point especially is in the agenda for the strategic plan for 2002. When it comes to medical education and engineering education, as it happens in a lot of other Arabic countries, usually in order to get access into this kind of education, a tawjihi with a very high score is required. For medicine is more or less 85%. This study path is a 6 years program, differently from the study path in pharmacy, veterinary, dentistry, and so on. It includes an internship, and then it leads to a final bachelor in medicine. And of course, it is a professional-oriented education. While for engineering, again, high average at tawjihi is usually required, and but differently from the medical education, is 5 years in length and lead to a professional degree, or also provide access if a student would like to pursue his studies at a second cycle degree into a master level. Here you can find the grading system, both for secondary school and higher education. For secondary school, the grading system is standard, actually, as you can see, while in the higher education, most of the time it depends according to the higher education institution. So there is not a fixed standard grading system, but a transcript of records issued by universities are usually also, let's say, they provide information about grading system. So you can easily identify this information directly on the qualifications that you receive. Concerning information resources, recommendation, and best practices, we suggest you to always address into the ENIC network website. And I recommend to read, if you are interested in understand more information, the Education Sector Strategic Plan 2017-2022, available and published by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education of Palestine. Concerning how the qualifications look like, actually for secondary education, the document is quite standard, and the final qualification is issued both in Arabic and English. It's also possible to verify the result of the current academic year of the General Certificate of Secondary Education on the link provided by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. And every year also it's possible to check the average requirement set at the national level in order to get access into higher education. As for universities, actually, I mean, again, qualifications, transcripts, diplomas, provisional certificates are issued both in mainly in Arabic, but sometimes it's also possible to require the English version, while for medicine and engineering, it's commonly to find documents directly issued in English. And some universities also publish a link where it's possible to verify and check the results of the graduates of the year or the previous academic year. So sometimes when you receive a qualification coming from, for example, Al-Najah National University for credential evaluator is always, let's say, satisfying because we can easily check the results and be sure 100% about the qualification we are going to analyze. As for other existing best practices, there are many, probably more of you, let's say more of them you already are well aware about. I just would like to remind you the possibility of the EQPR, the European Qualifications Passport for Refugees, a project supported by the Council of Europe and specifically addressed to refugees with lack of documentation. Of course, there is this country briefing that I hope it might be useful for all of you. And I strongly recommend you always to share also doubts or any need of support with colleagues among the ENIC network if possible. So for my side, yeah, okay, I just put some references so you can check also directly on this link. And from my side, that's all. I hope everything is clear, and I would like just to give back the floor to Ellen. Thank you very much.